Can chickens survive minus 34 in an unheated greenhouse? Let's find out. So our greenhouse shelter for the chickens, I can hear them. We have just a tunnel opening so that it really doesn't let in as much cold air. And the chickens are going crazy on the ice. They love ice. See them eating that ice? Look at that, eating up complete pieces. It's really the frost that gathers on the walls of the greenhouse. Looks like they're all here. Nobody's frozen. So it looks. They've had their snow to eat. Mabel's missing. Oh no. This is where they sleep. So you see this foil. This is an insulating foil. It reflects their infrared heat. And they definitely have been using this. Look at the, their droppings pile up. That's their nest box, one of their nest boxes, and here's the other one. Oh, there's lots of eggs in here. We don't expect much of these eggs because at minus 34, let's say, the eggs are going to be pretty frozen. Their water, it's solid. I mean, I can feel that's just, there's no water moving around in there. It's maybe in the core of these, it's not frozen. Or the core of these. Oh no, that's frozen pretty hard. We'll need some serious sun to start melting these cubes. Hey, Mabel! What are you doing all alone? So their water container certainly freezes, and that's why they've learned to eat ice. And the keys to keeping chickens at this kind of temperature is lots of food. So we have a big bulk feeder, and there's enough food here normally for a month. So we give it to them, and they're very happy. They like to pick through and just eat their favorite. What's your favorite? Huh? You don't want to tell me what your favorite is, eh? I think it's wheat. Let's see, are you going to show me? No. All right, out you go. So as long as they have food in abundance, and the most important for the winter at that kind of temperature is to keep them out of the wind. So the greenhouse does a good job. There's definitely not wind. By closing the entrance down to absolute minimum, there's not much in the way of a draft either. And the key is, and this I learned from Elliot Coleman with his 4-season harvest greenhouse, is when you put a shelter in a shelter, you actually gain 2 zones. 3 zones. It's a zone and a half per shelter. So a greenhouse is like going 1.5 zones warmer. So that's the greenhouse covering. And then having a shelter in the greenhouse gets them quite a bit further, gets them more of a zone. So you see here with their eggs, they eat the eggs because they're frozen. And otherwise they're not egg eaters, but when it's frozen and it cracks open, as this one is back here, you can see that one's totally frozen. And some aren't. Well, today's eggs probably are not frozen. So, pretty amazing that they continue to lay eggs at these temperatures. So at this time of year, we're actually composting the frozen eggs. We give enough to the dog. And another thing that we've been doing, but now I'm sure they would have eaten it all, is we give them suet in these feeders. Oh, there's still some left. Suet is beef fat. So we give them some beef fat in there. That hasn't been able to flow down. Some smaller chunks come out. They know what that is, and they definitely like the fat. So just that's a nice trick. If ever you have chickens through really cold temperatures, try to give them some beef fat. It's a really high energy, and actually they'll, look, here's one picked out a piece. It's high energy and will give them the necessary, not probably fatten a little bit, but it will give them the necessary energy to go through these cold periods. And it's probably the least expensive food you can get that will help them so much on these coldest days. Because we put a bag, which is almost half of this feeder is a bag. And a bag cost me $5 from the butcher. So go to your local butcher, ask him for fat, just fat. Doesn't have to be suet, which is the fat around the kidney. You could get any fat trimmings and buy it and put it in. And chickens definitely love fat. They recognize that this is something. And when I give suet to the birds, I thought, well, if the birds eat it, why wouldn't the chickens eat it? And when I started to give it to them, I realized they don't just like it, they love it, especially when it's cold. And they recognize the energy in these balls of fat. So get some fat, give it to your chickens, and they will definitely do better through these cold periods. Because it was probably pretty brutal in here through those nights of minus 34 is getting, it's the coldest we've had in quite a few years. Minus 31 was just like a warning shot, and then minus 34. Our record here on the farm in the, what is it, the 30 years we've had this place has been minus 38. Minus 38 is enough that it actually killed some of our killed a quarter of our apple trees at that time. Another few key ingredients for these chickens through any time is, and they've been in here with, this is oyster shell, very important, and grit. So here's their grit feeder. So you see it's just sand and gravel. They need to choose different sizes of gravel. So by having this, they'll find what they need. And it's very important for them to digest dry grains, because it actually is the stone that grinds the grain into flour, which they then can digest and get full use. If their droppings contain visible pieces of grain, then you know they're not getting enough grit. We have a grit feeder, but we also just have a winter supply, and this is sand as well. So the sand is here for them to take dust baths, because they will continue to take a dust bath even in this cold weather. You can see the sand. They'll scratch this up and it'll be enough to give them dust. We gave them this whole feeder, this bushel here, to act as their dust bath. Chickens, to be warm, have to have their feathers in good shape. So if they don't have access to anything to bath in, their feathers won't be in top shape and they will have a harder time through this cold. So make sure you let them do their toilettage properly. So we just fluff up the bedding, and that puts their manure falls through the hay. It's just, we want to keep it nice and clean and fresh, and then we'll give them some fresh one as well on top of that. Come on.
She was in here.
She was in here?
Yeah.
You like to come check it out, eh? You know that there might be a frozen egg for you somewhere. These masks are actually very handy when you are stirring up the bedding, because it does get dusty. So a mask, now I can't see anything. Can you let me get bedding out of here, you girls? You have to be right in there. Bo likes the fresh bedding. The chickens do too. So that's it. They've had clean bedding. And some of them like the clean hay in the nest box. Yes, yes. You happy? You've gone through the worst cold in the winter? All right. And their final touch, some nice apples that I've just frozen. You like this, girl? Nice treat. Apple popsicles for a cold day. We give them lots of cubby holes in here. Lots of places they could get away from the others, and that's important. Now, if you just have one big open space, if we had this all just one big open area as a greenhouse, what happens is when one of them's getting pecked at or picked on, it really doesn't have a place to escape. And if you make it like a little bit of a maze, it's much better, because the one that's getting picked on can escape the others. And that's an animal behavior thing. Chickens have a pecking order, and the one that's at the low end of the pecking order, you want to give it a chance. Mabel had been pecked on or was losing its feathers, and it lost all the head feathers almost about a month and a half ago, and it's regrown a really nice set of new feathers. Don't name your chickens too much, but that one is so characteristic. It's the only one that's like that. Well, that's good. You want some more fat there, chickens? There. Now you'll be able to access quite a bit more. And they're not crazy hungry for it because they've had fat. They just hadn't had any small pieces, but they had some access. So they'll continue to eat this all up. They won't let any of it go to waste as they need. So that's how you could get your chickens to survive the winter at minus 34 or whatever your low temperature is. Make sure they don't have drafts. Make sure they have a shelter inside their shelter. That really gains them some temperature. And this one has a flap that we put down so that this really keeps the heat. You do want to vent them. You don't want it closed in, because it's the moisture that's their biggest enemy in the cold like this. It's not the temperature itself, it's the moisture. They need to be fairly dry. And the greenhouse like this, by freezing over, this is all the moisture in here. It's all frozen onto the sides of the greenhouse right now. You see that? This is quite a thickness of water. So do chickens like ice? Absolutely. They love it. And it's not a hardship for them, because even when we give them water and we shake off ice, they prefer the ice at this time of year. I think because it doesn't give them a shock as much. Cold water can be a shock to their system. So the chickens made it. They didn't just survive, they thrived at minus 34. They're happy. They're laying Just remember, if you give them a shelter like this or a greenhouse, give them a second shelter, a place where they can sleep. Give them lots of food, water. Well, we don't give them water now. We actually give them snow and ice. And they do very well. No chicken died. In fact, I don't see any that have had even any injuries to their comb. They didn't freeze. They did well. Lots of food, lots of fat, lots of fun. Intrigued? Check out the virtual tour of the Permaculture Orchard. Have trees already? Pruningcourse.com. Subscribe, please. Check out some of the other videos or playlists. There's more to come. Stay tuned.